The Kawasaki Ninja H2 wasn't built to follow rules. It was made to break them. With a supercharged engine screaming past 11,000 RPM, this beast doesn't ride, it launches. It's so aggressive, some argue it shouldn't even be street legal. Too fast, too powerful, too dangerous for public roads. But how did Kawasaki unleash something this wild on public roads? An engine this violent can shred tires, melt brakes, and overpower even seasoned riders. Let's uncover the brutal truth behind the world's most dangerous production engine. It's the late 1960s, and Kawasaki is staring straight into the headlights of a serious challenge. Honda had just dropped the CB750 in 1969. A smooth four-cylinder wonder that didn't just perform well, it did it with style, reliability, and refinement. The motorcycle world was stunned. While every other company scrambled to create their own version of Honda's magic, Kawasaki went in the complete opposite direction. They weren't interested in building something nice and civilized. Nope, they wanted raw, unfiltered power. This was the beginning of the top-secret N100 plan. This project wasn't about making a bike that was easy to ride or balanced for every occasion. Kawasaki wanted the fastest street bike, period. The goal was simple: dominate drag strips and leave everyone in the dust at traffic lights. They weren't aiming for friendly. They were engineering a beast for the streets. So what kind of power did they cram into this monster? You see, when the Kawasaki H2 finally roared onto the scene in 1971, it was clear they hadn't held anything back. At its heart was a 748 cubic centimeter, air-cooled, two-stroke triple that pumped out 74 horsepower, wild for its time. Back then, even top-end 750cc bikes barely hit 60 horsepower. And while Honda's CB750 was fast, it made 67 horsepower and weighed much more. But it wasn't just about the numbers. The H2's power delivery was like flipping a switch. Below 5,000 RPM, the bike felt sleepy. But once you twisted that throttle a little further, the power hit you like a truck, 77 Newton meters of torque, slamming through in an instant. It was sudden, brutal, and could throw even seasoned riders off balance. Now here's the thing. Kawasaki stuck this wild engine into a frame that wasn't really built for it. The chassis was a basic steel tube design, light and affordable, but not strong enough. Under hard acceleration, it would flex, leading to wobbles and even tank slappers at high speeds. But what about the rear suspension? Basic twin shocks that couldn't keep up with the madness, especially when the front end started lifting under full throttle. The handling was just as unpredictable. The bike was twitchy and aggressive, great in a straight line but scary in corners. It could suddenly shift mid-turn, leaving riders with no warning and no time to react. The result? A machine that was both thrilling and terrifying, a true legend born from chaos. But let's talk about the part of the Kawasaki H2 that made every rider sweat more than the engine ever could: the brakes. Honestly, calling it a braking system feels generous. This beast had a single 295mm front disc with a basic two-piston caliper. That might have worked fine on a smaller, slower bike, but on a machine that could rocket to triple-digit speeds in seconds? Yeah, not even close. Out back, you had a tiny 203mm drum brake, more of a suggestion than a real stopper. Try riding this thing hard and you'd discover brake fade almost immediately. The lever feel was vague, and emergency braking wasn't a "let's stop calmly" moment. It was a full-blown prayer. Imagine going 100 miles per hour faster than most cars hit 60 and not being sure if your brakes were up for the job. Every twist of the throttle felt like a gamble with physics. Now, what really gave the H2 its fearsome bite was that wicked two-stroke power band. It only came alive between 5,000 and 7,500 RPM. Below that? Meh. It felt like any regular bike. But once it hit the power band, everything exploded. The front wheel would lift, the rear could slide, and if you weren't holding on tight, good luck. It was like the bike had a split personality, tame 1 second, wild stallion the next. The throttle wasn't something you eased into. You fought to survive the burst. And that's exactly how it got the nickname, the Widowmaker. This wasn't some clever Kawasaki marketing stunt. It came from real stories in garages, biker bars, and hospital beds. Tony Nikosha, one of Kawasaki's own test riders, said it started with the H1, but when the H2 showed up, it was a whole new level of unpredictable. It wasn't just fast, it was dangerous. As more riders took it to the streets, injuries piled up, broken bones, concussions, high sides, and worse. Emergency rooms started associating Kawasaki with a very specific kind of chaos. The H2 had no rider aids, no traction control, no forgiveness. If the front end lifted mid-corner, it was all on you to save it. If you couldn't, well, you'd become part of the Widowmaker legend. But what do you think was one of the scariest things that could happen while riding the Kawasaki H2? Well, it was the dreaded tank slapper. Imagine you're flying down the road, feeling the rush, and then suddenly the handlebars start shaking violently side to side. That's a tank slapper. It's not just a little wobble, it's a full-blown front-end meltdown that could launch even experienced riders off the bike. This terrifying phenomenon usually started when the front wheel lifted during a hard launch or hit a bump in the road. When it came back down slightly misaligned, all hell could break loose. The front end would start swinging side to side, and as the speed increased, so did the violence. Riders said it felt like the handlebars were trying to punch you out. And here's the worst part. Trying to fight it or slam the brakes usually made it worse. The only hope was to hold on and pray it stopped before you hit the pavement. But for all its wild behavior, the H2 found a cult following in a very different world: underground racing. While engineers were losing sleep over safety issues, street racers were busy lining up at midnight, ready to unleash the H2's straight-line fury. On back roads, drag strips, and deserted highways, the H2 was unstoppable. Handling didn't matter. Braking didn't matter. All that mattered was how brutally fast it could launch, and it was ferocious. It didn't take long before Kawasaki turned that street rocket into a full-on track weapon, the H2R. This was the race-bred version with around 100 horsepower screaming at 9,000 RPM. It was lighter, faster, and even more extreme. The H2R cleaned up on the track. Paul Smart, Masahiro Vada, and Greg Hanford all bagged major wins. In fact, it was so dominant that Kawasaki Australia was told to stop entering races after 1976. That's how far ahead it was. The Street H2, because of this racing bloodline, gained serious street cred. It wasn't just a bike anymore. It became a symbol of raw power and rebellion. In the 1970s, with the counterculture movement in full swing, this bike represented freedom, danger, and attitude. It became the ride of choice for outlaw bikers and speed junkies who didn't just want to ride, they wanted to make a statement. And the H2, with its brutal power and sketchy behavior, screamed rebellion like nothing else. Let's be honest, the Kawasaki H2 was wild, fast, and thrilling, but underneath all that madness were serious technical flaws that ultimately sealed its fate. The biggest issue? The frame just couldn't handle the engine. Kawasaki had taken a race-bred, two-stroke monster of a motor and slapped it into a frame designed for much tamer bikes. It was a basic tubular steel setup, standard for the time, but way too soft for what this engine could dish out. At high speeds or during full throttle launches, the frame would actually flex, almost like a fishing rod. This made the handling feel vague and unpredictable. You'd get sudden front-end lift or the rear tire stepping out without warning. Cornering was a gamble. Sometimes the bike would hold its line, other times it would twitch or drift mid-turn. And when you combine that flex with high-speed aerodynamics, boom, instant recipe for a tank slapper. What happened was a vicious cycle. The engine's power would throw off the suspension, the flexi frame would react poorly, and before you knew it, the whole bike felt like it was fighting itself. Riders often said it felt like the H2 was trying to break free and shake itself apart. And if all that wasn't enough, emissions and fuel economy dealt the final blow. Two-stroke engines were filthy, producing clouds of smoke and burning through oil and fuel like there was no tomorrow. It drank nearly 10 liters per 62 miles and pumped out more hydrocarbons than multiple cars combined. With the oil crisis hitting and fuel prices rising, The H2 suddenly looked less like a thrill ride and more like a gas-guzzling dinosaur. The world was changing, and unfortunately for the H2, it just couldn't keep up. As the Kawasaki H2's dangerous reputation spread like wildfire, insurance companies started to panic, and with good reason. Crashes, injuries, and totaled bikes were piling up, and the H2 was almost always part of the story. Soon, insurance premiums for the H2 shot through the roof. In some cases, insurance companies flat out refused to cover the bike, no matter how skilled or experienced the rider was. Owning an H2 became more than just expensive, it became financially risky. Even riders who could afford the bike often couldn't afford to insure it. And those who could, they were sometimes paying nearly as much in premiums as they did for the bike itself. Things got worse because the H2 was attracting younger riders drawn to its wild reputation, but who didn't always have the skills to control it. This trend only made the bike even less appealing to insurers, feeding a vicious cycle of rising costs and disappearing coverage. But the problems didn't stop at insurance. Lawyers began circling, too. As H2-related accidents mounted, Kawasaki started facing lawsuits from families and injured riders claiming the bike was dangerously flawed. The main argument? That the H2's power delivery was so sudden and violent, it should have come with serious warnings, or shouldn't have been built at all. These cases raised tough questions about manufacturer responsibility and ended up shaping future motorcycle safety standards. All the while, the media started turning against the H2. Motorcycle magazines that once praised its insane speed began warning readers to stay away unless they really knew what they were doing. What was once seen as bold and rebellious now came across as reckless and irresponsible. Public opinion shifted hard, and the H2 became a cautionary tale instead of a dream machine. Then came the final blow: government pressure. By 1974, stricter emissions laws, new noise limits, and tighter safety regulations were all coming into play. The H2's smoky two-stroke engine, bone-rattling noise, and violent performance didn't stand a chance in this new world. No single law banned it, but the environment was becoming so unfriendly that Kawasaki eventually threw in the towel and discontinued the bike. But let's take a step back and really understand what made the Kawasaki H2 so wild. It wasn't just the engine or the speed, it was the entire engineering philosophy behind it. Kawasaki's team went all in on one simple idea: power over everything. They believed that if you gave riders unmatched acceleration, they'd gladly accept whatever trade-offs came with it. Comfort, safety, fuel economy didn't matter. Everything about the H2 reflected this mindset. The engine was tuned for brutal output, not smooth delivery. The chassis? As light as possible, even if that meant it would twist under pressure. The suspension? Basic, non-adjustable, and not built to tame the beast. The result was a machine that could destroy anything in a straight line, but cornering, braking, or just riding it safely? That was your problem. A big part of the H2's character came from his two-stroke engine. Unlike four-strokes, which fire every other crankshaft revolution, two-strokes fire every time, giving you way more power for the engine's size. They're lighter, simpler, and cheaper to build, but they also have a nasty temper. Power hits hard and fast in a narrow RPM window, making the bike behave like a light switch. Calm 1 second, chaos the next. And they drink fuel, emit smoke, and rattle the frame with intense vibrations. Kawasaki's choice to go with a 3-cylinder two-stroke just amped things up further. You got more torque and a totally unique exhaust howl, but you also got more vibration, more heat, and more stress on that already flexy frame. And let's not forget the big picture battle going on in the motorcycle world. At that time, British bikes ruled the performance scene. They had style, heritage, and character. But Kawasaki wasn't interested in tradition. With the H2, they were out to smash records, not polish chrome. The H2 was about raw data, horsepower, quarter-mile times, and acceleration. It marked a turning point where performance numbers began to trump nostalgia, and that shift helped Japan rise to dominate the high-performance motorcycle world. Fast forward to 2025, and its spiritual successor, the Kawasaki Ninja H2, carries the torch. But this time, it's sharpened by cutting-edge technology, refined engineering, and a level of control the original could only dream of. Still the world's only supercharged production hypersport motorcycle, the latest H2 is a living example of what happens when you embrace insane performance and bring it under precise command. So, did Kawasaki tone it down? Not even close. In fact, they turned things up. At the heart of the H2 is a 998 cubic centimeter, liquid-cooled, inline, four-cylinder engine, equipped with a factory-designed supercharger. That's not just marketing talk, it's real, race-inspired tech that delivers explosive acceleration at any RPM. The engine pumps out 231 horsepower, around 228 horsepower, at 11,500 RPM without ram air. And when the bike's intake gets a full gulp of air, it climbs to nearly 240 horsepower. Torque comes in at a punchy 141.7 Newton meters at 11,000 revolutions per minute, giving you relentless drive whether you're storming the straights or powering out of corners. Its dog-ring 6-speed transmission, straight from Kawasaki's racing efforts, offers lightning-quick shifts, further aided by a bi-directional quickshifter and assist and slipper clutch. Whether you're pushing lap times or riding twisty mountain roads, every shift feels crisp and purposeful. But the H2 isn't just about brute force, it's a showcase of advanced engineering. Braking is handled by Brembo-style monoblock calipers and dual 330mm front discs, giving you track-level stopping power. Suspension is equally elite, with fully adjustable KYB forks up front and an Öhlins TTX 36 shock at the rear, ensuring confident handling even under extreme loads. Rider aids are as futuristic as the bike looks. You get cornering ABS, traction control, launch control, and multiple riding modes tailored for wet roads, everyday use, or all-out sport riding. And for the techies, there's a TFT display with smartphone connectivity, GPS integration, and a suite of smart safety features like lean-sensitive cornering lights, tire pressure monitoring, and blind spot monitoring, especially on the touring-oriented H2 SXSE. Its trellis frame balances rigidity and lightness, offering high-speed stability without sacrificing agility. The bodywork is aggressive and aerodynamic, dressed in either lightweight plastics or exclusive carbon fiber panels. Some even come with self-healing paint that erases small scratches over time. For those seeking longer rides, the H2 SX models bring comfort into the equation with ergonomic upgrades and touring features like adaptive cruise control and a more forgiving seat. With three main variants, the no-compromise Ninja H2, the exotic H2 Carbon, and the tech-filled H2 SX/SXSE, there's a flavor for every kind of thrill seeker. But at its core, the 2025 Ninja H2 is proof that Kawasaki hasn't forgotten how to build wild machines. It's a hypersport icon, descended from chaos but refined for the modern rider who wants to ride on the edge without falling off it. And that's why the H2 is cherished today. Not because it was easy, but because it was real, a raw, untamed machine from a time when rules were an afterthought. A legend born from chaos. So what do you think? Should a bike like the H2 be allowed on public roads? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you're into machines that blur the line between genius and madness, hit like and subscribe for more wild rides.